How about this? If you're not totally in charge, you're not in charge at all. As is oftentimes the case, at least when I pointed out, I could say that some knowledge of this is in fairly common currency in ordinary life. That is, you cannot appoint somebody to be a manager, a straw boss. You cannot tell somebody that they're in charge of something and then later find out that they were only, as far as they were concerned, partially in charge, or only take credit or only take responsibility for being in charge of specific things. That if later you say, well, what happened to so-and-so? Well, no, I didn't look into that. I trusted somebody else. Out in the world, in the business world, all the way from construction to sales, such a person would not last long. We should be more specific. They're going to last as long as anybody. That's just the way things are in the city. But if you're looking for that person to have any further insight into how things work, you can forget it, because they're not going to last along any line wherein they can see past, as it were. Their responsibility ends where they see it ends, once it's pointed out to them. There's a key word in several things I was going to say, and that key word is your. Y-O-U-R. And a variation of it, Y-O-U apostrophe R-E, such as if you're not totally in charge, you're not in charge at all. But then it's going to come up to be the pronoun, the Y-O-U-R, very shortly. You cannot be in charge unless three immediate descriptions that I have mentioned before verbally spring to my lips, if not my brain. If you're going to be in charge, you have got to be operating at a level, at your level, that is total, not uncertain like life does. But at your level, it's got to be, you've got to be total in what you're doing. You've got to be more complex than those around you, including yourself. And you have got to be conclusive. Now in the city, all of this, for those of you whose memory can stretch in a non-linear fashion over the last few weeks, in the city, all of this ranges from being useless to moot to impossible. As I pointed out, at the three-dimensional level, life does not totally do anything. And at the areas wherein it apparently does do something, that which it did tends to disappear. And of course, when things tend to disappear, human intelligence tends to disregard it. Human intelligence tends to forget about it. Therefore, as I pointed out, the artifacts of history in the human nervous system are the memories of failures. That's what people are hawking out at the ruins, from Greek to Roman to Albanian to Yorn, which is a variation of yours. They are selling the souvenirs of failure. But now, if you're going to go past that, if you are going to be truly in charge, you have got to be total in what you're doing, wherein life does not do so. You've got to be more complex than those around you, including yourself. And you have got to be conclusive in the midst of the fact that life is not conclusive. In the times in which it appears to be conclusive, it disappears. So now, I could describe this in a sense that this kind of activity is your attempt, an individual attempt, to finish up your little corner in the midst of a never-ending building project. For those of you who have had past experience in such intellectual affairs as driving nails, it's as though you are in the midst, everyone, of this never-ending house. It's being built all around you. But you end up, if you know what you're doing, and it's almost as though you have your own little area to finish. Whereas, of course, in ordinary affairs, a subcontractor, a carpenter, a plumber here and there, they can say, well, your job is to do that. And as far as he knows, that's all of it. So there is, of course, some external manifestation of this. But to do this individually, to do this personally, which is beyond the city level, you have to have your own feeling of your own little corner in the midst of this never-ending building project. And your attempt is to go into your corner and to finish it up. This is a variable, if not an idiosyncratic variation of one of my earlier ones of keeping your desk clean. That every day, every hour, every minute, but let's say every day, try to get your desk all cleaned up, straightened, all the pencils and everything just in line, and all the correspondence disappeared. It's impossible. Life will continue to put stuff on your desk. You can get it all straightened out at 5 o'clock, the whistle blow, and you start to leave, and life will make somebody come by and lay something, a folder on your desk. Maybe just after you left, so that you come in the morning, it's all messed up. Or that night, life made some janitor have a few shots of wine and pull out some of your drawers and drop stuff and mess up your pencils. They're all straightened out. You can't stop it. But you can operate as though once you can get a personal feel. I should say think, but most of you wouldn't follow it. A personal feel for your corner, your little corner in the midst of this never-ending, humongous building project. An individual feel for your little desk. In the midst, the company never closes down. You just think it stops at 5. But whenever you get off from work, whenever you feel like you're off from work. But the operations, the commerce of life never stops. And you cannot clean off your desk. You can, but all you got to do is turn your head. Or if you want it this way, you don't even have to turn your head. You can clean off your desk and put up a sign right around your neck. My desk is clean. I don't need more today. I'm off duty. Is that going to stop life? You got to be smarter than that. Life will still make people just, as it were, anytime they want to, people will come by and put stuff on your desk again, and you can say, I just straightened it up. They don't care, because life doesn't care. Life is not going to stop littering your desk. Life is not going to stop the building project unless you're in the midst of some area that is about to be condemned, unless you're overworking in the dinosaur wing. The key word, as I said in all of this, is your. And it's only you that can find a your corner. It is only you that can get the correct feel for what your desk is. I can't do it. I talk around it. But only you can do it. And after that, that's all that matters. To be real crude, like some of you enjoy, after that, it's nobody's damn business. It's not even life's business. Of course it is, but life just doesn't seem to have the inclination or the need to fool around with one person here or there who says, well, this is my little corner, by God, and I got it finished. I finished it out. Don't need any more help. Don't need anybody to come by. My little part is finished. You're still surrounded by sawdust, noise, mayhem, bedlam. It'll never stop. The building project never stops. That house is being worked on night and day, and nobody ever finishes. In a sense, you never finish, not in this lifetime. But once you understand and got a feel for your own little corner, you can, well, I'll call it still an attempt, that this is the attempt, and I wouldn't say it unless there was some hope for success, to sort of finish out your little corner. But it's by your definition, nobody else's. Because no one, oh, all right, someone could come by and say, you're finished. I was going to say that no one will ever come by and say you're finished. But since we were short on tape tonight, then I just have to come back and say, in a few more minutes, give you another version. Oh, all right, we got tape. Here we go. No one will ever come by and say, well, your part's finished. Right? Variation. Somebody could come by and say, well, you got your part finished. It's the same thing. It doesn't matter. Because your feel, if you're ordinary, is always that, well, I thought it was finished, but Jesus, if nothing else, sawdust is blown over here. Somebody came through when I went home last night. One of those other plumbers, one of those other carpenters, a roofer, dropped something, messed up my floor. It never stops by any definition other than yours and other than on a new level of insight. At the old level of intelligence, you cannot find your own little corner. Everybody thinks they're trying to. Some people are trying to mark out their corner, but they're never satisfied. You can't find it. If you could find it, but you can't. But if you could never get it finished. Whatever your little job is, whatever little, if you are a plumber, if you are the tile installer in the floor in this corner bathroom, that's all that life demands of you. You'll never get it finished at the ordinary level. Even if somebody comes by and says, good job, we didn't think you'd finish. They'll leave, and it doesn't matter, because you'll look and feel like, well, I'm not finished. So it doesn't matter if they do. I was going to give you the easy versions when I went through that little contorted part, when I was going to say that no one will ever tell you you're finished. But that's the same thing. They can come by and say, my God, you're not finished. And you say, oh, by God, I know it. Leave me alone. Your desk is messed up. Well, I had it cleaned up. Somebody else did it. Yeah, right. Next time I come by here, have it straightened up. If you'd come by 5 minutes before it'd been straightened up. Yeah. It's the same thing if somebody came by and said, you're the only person in the place that has their desk straightened out. Good show, and they leave. As soon as they leave, you look around, and your desk still is not symmetrical. There's still a speck of dust. It still does not feel right. That's because you're still alive. That's because life is still building. That's because business is still operating even though the 5 o'clock whistle blew and you feel like I could leave. Because you get real good and be able to think beyond 3 dimensions. You can leave and your desk is still with you. So you can leave at 5, but your desk is still with you. You can be home and somebody mess up your desk. You don't even have to be there. Or your desk can be with you and your desk is not where they're messing it up and it still get messed up. The key word in all of it is your. No one can define it. No one can tell you, which is part of what religion and all kinds of would-be mystical and philosophical systems attempt to do, is to tell somebody what their corner is. Not individually. The way it works out in life, of course, has to be more simplistic than that. It comes out that somebody, life makes somebody, some figure say, you belong in my corner. You and all these people, and, you are the flock, you are the followers, and you'll never find your corner had it not been for me. And so it is not really a basis of an individual corner. It's like a select corner. The gods, fate, higher intelligence, cosmic forces has brought me to the place that I can join in collectively in a conversation of a group of like-minded people in a definable personal corner. And that won't do. That won't do for these kind of purposes. As I go back and repeat what I said, you could look at this kind of activity as being the attempt individually for you to finish out your little corner in the midst of this never-ending building project. But it has to be yours. If you don't find it, if you can't feel it, if you can't think it, if you never know what I mean, you can never finish it. Or you can never finish it and then not care if it's finished or not finished. You can never not finish it and not care whether it's finished or not finished. You can not finish it and not care if somebody says it's finished or not finished, or you can not finish it and still not care whether somebody tells you it's finished or not finished. Do you see? But none of this is possible unless it is your understanding and it is your knowledge that this is my corner. This is my desk. I was going in a minute through some of the questions regarding the extracts from Chi roots we had read, but I want to try and stretch something I mentioned last time. I was talking about in general and brought up already tonight about life not totally being sure of what it's doing. You recall that? And the impossibility of anything knowing what it's doing itself, since life does not, on the secondary level, such as men at the ordinary level of intelligence, the secondary level, can never know themselves as long as everything has for its basis of reference itself, and that's it. There is no way to know yourself, no way for the dog to know of its dogness. In line with that, I didn't say it the other night, but if my lips don't fail me, I'm going to say it tonight, right now. All right, here it comes. Those who think that knowledge of man's inner life will be, must be, at the expense of his outer one, will never have knowledge really of anything. And although it's very likely that I'm the first person to ever put it in those kind of words, little letters and words in that particular sequence, this is a part of the thinking reality of humanity. People who believe that they are thinking, who believe that they are interested in the inner life of man, whether they think about it on the basis of psychological inquiry or whether they think about it on the basis of some sort of spiritual investigation, perusal of themselves. Even if they do not state it this way, the belief, the molecular structure in the nervous system of man is such that ordinary people who think that they are in pursuit of, are interested in, are engaged in a study of man's inner nature, even if they don't define it, if it's pointed out in a certain way, they will, without any hesitation, state that this must be, it will be, at the expense of knowledge of one's outer life, of man's outer life. They would, by and large, also envoy it, postscript it by saying that a knowledge of outer life vis-a-vis the inner one is of no great consequence anyway. That a person, a right-thinking person such as myself, giving over their life and their energies to the attempt to know themselves, although it be at the expense of so-called knowledge of the world and what's going on, that's no real expense at all, because the only thing of any importance is this. The way things are arranged again in the dualistic manner in the city, that seems to be the predominant area of interest, as opposed to large groups of people voraciously, vocally being interested in the outer life. They are there, it's just not expressed that way. Politicians, students of history, well, let's say a politician, a would-be politician at least. If you ask them, if you had them admit, proclaim that their interest in life was in the external of man, a Karl Marx type, to make it really archetypical, that they would say that the only thing of any intellectual, if not spiritual, nourishment to man is a kind of extraordinary knowledge of the workings of life. I could get those same kinds of people, even though they might never use the terms, I would get them to readily admit, once I just put it in a certain way, no great trick, that to pursue a study of this, to ponder it, to try and gain deeper insight into the workings of the world is indeed, it must be, it will be at the expense of so-called introspection or studying myself. You just can't do both. And so they would say the study of the political, the economic machinery of life, the serious study, if an individual really lends himself to this kind of interest, it is going to be, it must be, at the expense of this so-called interest in oneself. It just has to be. They, just the way things are, as I was pointing out, they are not as historically, even contemporarily, as verbally identifiable It is those who think that they are pursuing some sort of spiritual quest who will primarily admit that they have no great interest or time in studying the external world, and will even, as I said, very often throw in as an addendum that it's no big deal anyway, that that's not going to help you. And on the other hand, as I said, they're just not as verbally identifiable. But those who would say that a man's best shot at understanding what's going on is to understand the machinery of the world, not just science, but the social sciences, the politics, the economics, etc. And it will probably be at the expense of some sort of introspection about who am I personally, why am I motivated this way. But they would say also that that's not going to get you anywhere. People have been fooling around with that kind of stuff, philosophers studying their navel for thousands of years. What we got to do now is look at what's going on. The cultural, the structural machinery out here, that's what makes us here. At any rate, I want you to see that that is one of the classic, although not always identified, dichotomies of life, that you've got two areas that you could study. You've got two areas in which humanity, those who would give any verbal agreement to having an interest in either one, would look at the pursuit, the interest in one of them, being at the expense of the other one, and the one that's getting the short shift, they would even say, is not of that much importance to begin with. All of you are subject to that to some degree. And the more complex, five-dimensional scheme of things, it doesn't matter which one, but I would point out that people who are immediately drawn to such as this, or even intermediately drawn to this, tend to be of the sort that I described in the first count. That is, it just seems natural to be studying ourselves. That's what I'm here for. That's what my interest. I don't care anything about politics. I don't care anything about economics. I don't care anything about the cultural aspects of history. The secrets lie within the individual. Okay. But the secrets also lie out there in the mass conversation. The secret also lies in politics, machinery of economics. The very things that most good spiritual-minded people would say not only are useless, they are boring. Who cares about that? I'll admit, when it gets into the areas, the way life has things split up, you do not find many religions based upon economics. They've been hard-pressed in our lifetime, or you caught the tail end of it, still part of it. They're hard-pressed, although God knows some of them have tried, to turn Marxism into a religion by saying, of course, this is not a religion, but then to replace what seems to be the kind of interest and inner journey to tell people, oh, forget all that because it won't get you anywhere. What we should do, I'm just using Marxism as the prime example that most of you should know, is then turn it into an unspecified and unidentified religion by studying out here. That does not make the same kind of, until now, historical impact. It seems that all religions, all would-be activities that you assume this was, when I tricked you into getting interested in it, that it is all some kind of eventual or ultimate or continual pondering and study of one's at least spiritual navel. And let the rest of the world go by. We'll all buy an island and we'll get away from that because, boy, that's bad news. All the religions have been saying that. If you had that kind of intelligence that my FRIP, my fictitious reasonably insane person, would have, somewhere along the line, you would have been straining at the kind of ordinary reins that hold in the intellect in the city and thought, somewhere, why is it all religions denounce the world? But now wait, when I say break the reins, because if an ordinary person were to do that, or if I were to confront an ordinary person and say, you claim to be religious, and plus you claim to be intelligent. You're one of those people that's got a degree in theology. Assuming I could say it without laughing. And they'd say yes. And I'd say, well, why? Have you ever noticed that your religion, whatever his religion was, doesn't matter, that your religion denounces the world? That is, it puts down the world at the expense of the inner life. And he said, well, certainly. And I said, Well, all right, you had a degree in theology, so that means that you at least had an undergraduate course in comparative religion. You say, yeah. Well, are you aware of the fact that you notice that every religion, the heathenistic religions, the religions that you say are pseudo-religions, they all denounce the world at the expense of the inner life? He'd go, well, yeah, everybody knows that. And I'd say, well, if you're intelligent, doesn't that strike you as curious at all? And what would life's answer be in that realm of humanity? Yep. It'd be, well, certainly not you idiot, referring to me. It just shows the validity of it. Even these religions that are not completely on the track like mine is, it shows at least God has let the message out somewhere that, you know, screw the world. If you're going to do right, you got to turn inwardly. That's what I meant by you got to get away from the reins that seem so self-evident in life. For me to say, doesn't it make you curious that, and I'll bring out these examples, that every time this pops up in history, the same thing is attendant to it. Now, to ordinary people, it does not. To ordinary people, that is, to old intelligence, there is self-evident evidence. But they look at me, that is my kind of information, my kind of inquiry, like I am the world's poster child for idiocy. Why are you asking, do I not find it curious that every time this area, this interest, this idea pops up in history, it's always attended by the same thing? Why should I find that curious? That just proves the validity of it. And then I would think to myself, yes, I am an idiot. And why should I talk to anybody? Do any of you begin to see that? It's the very thing that would be self-evident proof to ordinary intelligence. But it's the same kind of thing that for people properly drawn to this, it should strike them anything that is self-evident truth and is consistent in life, in history, that the very things that prove at that level that this must be valid, it must be true, because it pops up everywhere constantly. That's the very thing that you go, wait a minute. Anything that's self-evident is bad news. Anything that's self-evident is 4-day-old fish, 2-week-old visiting relatives. They both tend to begin to smell and get annoying. Because I've talked enough in different ways that some of you should already have some sort of your own flashing picture every now and then of my grand old equation, one of my oldest little things of I plus not I, remember, equals everything. The fish in the water. That's a friendly fish. The kind of gate of intelligence in the nervous system. It seems to be in here and then out there. The organ of skin itself, to more red-circuited people, more simplistic people, the actual organ of skin of everything beyond me is out there. Everything beyond me is not me, physically. And of course, people that are a little higher up in the nervous system, anything that's not in my mind, anything I don't believe is not me. It's not true. It's foreign, it's exotic. That all truth is, in a positive sense, if there was such one, since I shouldn't continue to fracture the King's English, should I? I was going to say a form of positive idiosyncrasy, but there is no such thing. All of this should give some of you your own fleeting picture that all of this, the skin, that my nervous system stops here, the old ideas even that are reflected out in life, political ideas that freedom, civil freedom, extends only insofar as my hand goes. That my rights stop when my fist touches your nose, and vice versa. That we have civil, sometimes they believe God-given rights to freedoms and liberties, but it only goes so far as my hand begins to touch you and assault you, that my foot begins to tread on your property. Internally, as people think of it, all of you should begin to get little flashes every now and then that you got no gills. There is no such equation. There is no gate between consciousness. Now, at the ordinary level, there is. You cannot tell anybody there's not. They're not misled. At the ordinary level of intelligence, you have got to think that way, or you could not think. Without that feeling of there being like a little doggy door that you can go in and out anytime you want to without your parents. I still like to think of our little furry friends as being our children. I know some of you join me the way your children's turned out. But it's not my fault. But then you're supposed to say, hey, it ain't mine either. And I say, now we're getting somewhere. But it's like you've got your own little doggy door that goes in and out. It's like you rush out there and you look at things every now and then you rush back in and you think about them. There is no such door, except you've got to think there's such a door, or the nervous system at the old level, at city level, would not operate. It is that kind of feeling of comparison that there is an inside to my door and there's an outside. I can go in, I can go out, I can think, and I can act. I can ponder, I can tell lies, I can say yes when I mean no, and vice versa. Without that kind of comparison, remember, without there being more than one word, there's got to be two words. You can't just have yes. You can't just have any one word, or you would not have speech. You cannot have just one thought, or you could not have intelligence. There's got to be at least two. There's got to be resistance. There's got to be something that this thing is not, or it cannot be. It can't be anything unless there's something else that the nervous system, the brain, knows that, all right, if this is this, and it looks around and there's no other this, there's no other not this, then it can't see that this is this. There's got to be a not this. But at the secondary level, it is all self-referring. The comparison is only to itself, or its genre. It is only comparison to other things on the secondary level. All of that is true and necessary. To get above that, you got to realize that all of this is a dream. All of this is city delusions. It's the heat from the pavement. It's the smog. It's the nitrous. There is no such division. There is no difference between the study of life out there and the study of life in here. But that is not some great spiritual moment of epiphany that I can whip on anybody. I could say that. People, I'm sure, have said those exact words long before me in the city, just ordinary people. There's no doubt. I can assure you of that. But it means nothing. And there could be some people in the city that thousands of years ago or today could hear something like that and go, hey, that's heavy. Let me write that down. But it means nothing. Nothing. It does not change anybody. They may even philosophically or theoretically, I guess they would think of it, be able to follow something like this, or something that just a philosopher or would be intellectual in the city could describe that, well, there's no great difference. We're all connected, and everything we do in some way is tied into what everybody else does, and we cannot be free from our culture, we can't be from our background, we can't be free from our genetic code, we can't be free from the weights and the guilt of our own histories, our people's histories, humanity's history. And so that people can just for a moment can be made to say, to agree to say, well, there's no real difference in man's inner life. It's not completely free in some way from what's happened out here and what is happening out here. And people all over the planet, people all in life's body will go, yeah, that's true. Oh, I need to remember that. That's true. And they mean it. Life will let them do that. That is true, and they'll write it down. But you know but now that means nothing. Absolutely nothing. If it meant anything, they would explode. If an ordinary person heard that and went, yes, 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 I hear that, and I agree completely, I can see it. If that were correct, if that were true, that person at that moment, that ordinary person, would die. They would die intellectually. They'd become a raving maniac. They would explode. I don't know what to tell you. They'd turn into peanut butter. They would melt. They would short circuit. They would fall down and go boom. That'd be the end of them. You cannot do that to ordinary intelligence, not profitably. You just can't do it. What this is to build another area, to raise the level, to find your own corner and attempt to finish it out in the midst of this never-ending mayhem. Chaos. This growth is you don't stop growth, but you stop participating intellectually in the feeling that this growth is in fact death, that this evolution is involution, that this life is in fact just a prelude to death, that this life is in fact a form of death, that this life of sanity is in fact insane. Just the ordinary feeling of city that people have, that life is nuts. I'm nuts. We're all nuts. Life is going to explode. I bet the planet will blow up before I go crazy enough to kill somebody or kill myself. So there. Well, the part I wanted to leave you with before I start the questions is simply, I'll repeat it if I can. Sure you can. Those who believe, those who think. I keep falling back, even though I told you people not to, that I'm going to have to get into a more specific, I just told you to trust me and quit saying believe and quit thinking believe and say think. And to almost all of you, it will not even compute. You can trust me, or you just take it as being something that had some validity, or I wouldn't have said it. But you still feel as though you feel and believe. Or those of you who are getting better, sideways. Some crowds get better. Some of you who are sideways, you think that you believe. And some of you think that since I told you that you can cease believing, and then you think, yeah, but I still believe, but I won't say it. Back to my recapping of that one thing for the night. Those who think that the knowledge of oneself is being emblematic for all of humanity. To know thyself. To know thyself is to know God. To know oneself, the inner oneself, is to know the secret of the universe. Blah, 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 blah. Those who believe, those who think that the knowledge of oneself will be and must be at the expense of knowledge of the out there, and vice versa, will really never know anything. Now some more of you recall, those of you who weren't here or didn't see the tape, back from the last several years, several weeks ago, we had read a collection, some extracts of some of the, what amount to as epigrams from me and my various mouthpieces. And I had them just read a whole night's worth, and then I solicited, I invited any of you who heard it, because I used to, as you know, never commented particularly on the little one-liners. Those who would like to hear something additional said. And that's what I'm going into tonight. Does that bring us up to speed? All right. Someone remembered this one more or less, that the line went, now I won't even guarantee that I am literally quoting myself, but I'll give you the gist of it, was that the line went, could any useful idea ever be seen as false? That was the gist of it. Now who but old intelligence, who but an ordinary person would even be tempted to let theory, perhaps the question of veracity about something, who would ever let theory hinder the use of something that was useful? It wasn't any more complicated than I said. If any of you are waiting for the rest. Who but ordinary would let some kind of theory, who would let thinking interfere with action that was proper action, that was useful action? Now, the answer to that, as always, as long as we're using the tongue and the ear, is twofold. Who would do that in the city? Everyone. Everyone. It is not all the time manifested in such a way that if you had some need that you could sit around and point out that continually people operating in ways that were not in their own best self-interest. That's not necessarily true. But people do let thinking hinder that which, in their case, did or could prove useful they let it hinder the usefulness of that which could be useful because of some theory, because of some thinking. That is the way things should be in the city. That helps keep energy moving. That helps keep people fighting. That helps keep religions in business. That helps keep political systems in business. You don't understand? Because people will do things, apparently, and that's the way it appears to be. This is not, of course, the end of it. But at the 3D level, people apparently do things that from somebody else's view, some other equally as reasonable city person's view, will do something that is not in their own self-interest. And if it's pointed out to them, or if it's even pointed out that previous to this you were operating another way, and it was more efficient, it was more useful to you, they go, no, no, no. That was yesterday. That's before we saw the light. That's before I saw the light. But you were living quite well over here. Yes, I know I was. But that's when I was living under such and such political system, let's say. Or that's when I believed I was such and such kind of religious person. I got converted. A wandering rabbi came through town and converted me, plus cut off a part of my skin I don't want to talk about. Or I was a Christian socialist until an itinerant Marxist preacher came through town, and now I see the light. And but from some other equally as valid view, some other ordinary city person says, at least to themselves, they will say, well, you were better off when you were a Christian before you converted to Judaism. You were better off as a socialist before you converted to Marxist. It does not work. It does not compute. The person says no. There's no sense in me dragging out this verbally. You either can see what I'm referring to or you can't. That in the city things are arranged in such a way that that which normally would be called theory, the world of ideas, will apparently make people do things, will apparently make people abandon past operations and actions that from almost any 3D reasonable view were proving to be more efficient, had been more efficient, had been more beneficial to them than what they're doing now, and yet, the way life is arranged, their own ordinary intellect will say, no, 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 you got it wrong, I'm better off now. And you look and you think, you're not. You don't have as much money, you're not as happy, you don't have as many alternatives in life of things to pursue, whether it be religious, economic, anything. And another person can say, you have limited yourself. You have in some way regressed. You have cut out part of your own freedom. And they go, no, you don't understand. You have given up part of your beneficial actions in the past for the sake of some damn idea. And you're almost getting close on the secondary level to fighting words. Don't call my new religion a damn idea. It's very important to me. Sure, you have to perhaps suffer a little and pay an additional price besides the loss of that few grams of skin. You have to do things if you're going to go forward in life. But they do not see any more complex use for the line that the person asked about, that I put as a rhetorical question, that could any useful idea ever be seen as false? And in the city, the answer is a resounding, well, certainly, you idiot. We got to turn the tape over. But old intelligence ideas, usefulness does not enter into the world of that which is right, that which is true. This non-ending building project could not operate on that basis. It's only that a few people here and there can attempt to do otherwise and do it without any great effect upon the overall project. We've got to turn the tape over. Next one. The line was, again trying to quote myself because I can't trust you people, some of you people, what you put down. It's just thankful in my brilliance that I can make out what it was. The line was, if the avant-garde does not suffer immediate losses, it was not the advance guard. That was the line. And the person, of course, asked me if I'd say something else. And so here I go. Everybody knows what a point man is, don't you? In the service. Well, it's the avant-garde, but the point man, the people out that they send out, the scouts, to reconnoiter, to feel out the enemy. A salesman, they send him into town. We're trying to sell these phony baloney magazine subscriptions. You send some guy into town to maybe try it once or twice to see if he gets arrested, where the rest of us can come into town with some impunity, perhaps, if not hope for success. The point man, but now I also consider it this way, the point molecules in life. The point molecules of change are always going to suffer the greatest because they are right at the edge of life's uncertainty. The avant-garde, if it does not suffer immediate losses, was not the advance guard. If this were true, if there was such a thing as an avant-garde that did not suffer losses, then where the avant-garde would have gone, which, if you're following all this, which is always the problem verbally, it is, by my own definition, by my own mapping, would be a now self-denial that was the advance guard if it did this. But if the advance guard in the city was identified as here's the advance guard, and they went out and they didn't suffer losses, then they're somewhere such as exploring the land of dinosaurs. They're out reconnoitering Elvis and Jesus. In other words, they're doing nothing. They are not where life is uncertain, because where the dinosaurs used to roam, where Elvis used to play, is no longer uncertain. Life decided, I don't need dinosaurs, and after that it decided, well, I don't need Elvis. So if the advance guard, if it's called that, if the advance guard, that we're going to bravely go where no man has gone before, if Captain Kirk and all those guys fly there and they don't suffer immediate losses, they didn't go where men they didn't bravely go, or anyway, they didn't go where men had never been before. They went where people had already been. They went where people not already been. There's probably a bunch of guys waiting there with magazine subscription coupons for them. The cutting edge of life, where life is changing, and apparently in men, whether it be philosophically, intellectually, politically, religiously, if there's some group around saying, well, all right, I am leading people to a new land, the new Jerusalem, the new frontiers, the new marketplace of ideas and economics. If it indeed is true, if there is a cutting edge in the city. It's not that readily identified by ordinary people. But there is no great secret. It is there. And it is always by its own definition, if it's being called the advance guard, the cutting edge of what's happening. It is always on the front line of expansionist combat. Now this happens down, if this is sounding too vague for you, at a real simplistic level. Very simplistic. Let's take the world of fashion. I don't know what could be more secondary than that. And they use such terms. You pick up a magazine, you read a newspaper article, and they'll say, brand new, the hottest young guy or woman, 18 years old, came in on a Trailways bus from Omaha, Nebraska, of all places, wandered down to one of the Bill Glass outlets, conned his way into sweeping floors within 18 months, doing first-class design work, so out of sight and mind-blowing that Glass wouldn't even fool with it. He left, won $500 in the New York lottery, started his own little company, and now, this article says, is the advance guard of this year's fashion. If indeed, and there is an advance guard in fashion, believe it or not, in all kinds of secondary things that is important to life, even though they're secondary. But if indeed he is on the cutting edge, and I could have picked out a painter, I could pick out a musician, conductor, an author, if indeed he's on the cutting edge, that is, he is where life is changing in that particular little area. If he is there, he is in the combat zone. That is, this guy that one article, one magazine praises as he is the new Yves Saint Laurent. He is the new Bill Blass. He's all of it rolled up into one. If that's true, if life is using this guy or this woman there or some other field, if that is true, if he is right there at the cutting edge, the next day, 48 hours later, you know what's going to happen. He's going to be a sitting duck. People are going to be attacking him from all sides. There will be casualties. Not that he'll be killed. He'll be offended. He'll be criticized. He will be in the midst of expansionist combat. If it is the advance guard, if you are where life is actually expanding, and especially if you're on the cutting edge, there are going to be losses. This does not mean that life is going to crucify you, that life is going to kill you, but there are going to be losses. Since last time we met, I was trying to get harder on these little interesting things, the ones I find interesting to try, and even better, to find some personal significance to some of this. Few people can't do some of this by now. If you are at the advance guard, if your own intellect is pushing from your own corner, only yours, it's not by my definition, it's not by my standard, it's not through some structure of mine or anybody else's. If you are indeed pushing at the frontiers of your own thinking, you're going to suffer losses. What might they be? Come on! They're going to be the things that you already thought. And there is a feeling that people think they feel of a certain kind of loss, of fear, regret, hesitation. It's like I'm in the advance guard, if you want to take it back out real crudely and materialistically now, that I am physically out here in an advance guard in some kind of combat, and I look around and some of my old friends are beginning to fall, their feet cut out from under them, shot. And to say the least, I'm beginning to get a bit apprehensive. I don't know how to tell you to do it. I'm not sure this applies, but try and think about that internally. You do recognize good-natured sarcasm. Subtle attempt to get you to do it on your own. Next one. The line was more or less this: artists make the ruling powers uncomfortable. You remember that? I had several versions of that. Not the same thing, but around this same area. That is, political powers, the government, will stand all sorts of things that, relatively speaking, might appear to some people's thinking as being eminently dangerous, and then turn on the arts and treat them as though it was an asp clasped to their bosoms. I assume tyrants have bosoms. That is, they will let people march in the street perhaps, they'll let some sort of political dissension take place, and then some little dictator somewhere will go into an absolute fury over a book. That doesn't sound contemporaneous, does it? But over a book that criticizes him, or a painting that some guy's done, and the dictator looks at it and he's almost sure it's him, and it almost looks innocuous, or if not flattering, and yet something about it. And he looks at it and looks at the guy that painted it, and he looks at it and he knows damn well that this is not flattering. He don't know why. He knows it's dangerous, that we can't let this kind of shit go on. And so they will attack art many times quicker than they will physical dissension, even armed uprising. They will give more leeway many times than they will a painting, a sketch, just a caricature, a little broadside, a little pamphlet, just 4 or 5 lines long that's passed around. Consider that art. Now I could say that real artists make ruling powers uncomfortable. It's not necessary. I didn't originally say real, but now into the request for me to comment further upon it. From a certain view, let me point out that man's only possible, unique contribution to life is on the secondary level. Can all of you follow that? By my own mappings, by my own not invalid and not improper divisions of late into primary levels as primary purposes, and then the secondary versions of them. They're necessary, but they're secondary in relationship to the original. That fashion is secondary to a primary purpose of clothing oneself in something to physically stay within your needed body temperatures and etc. to physically survive in the elements. All right. You remember that? Then I can, from a certain view, properly point out to you that man's only possible, unique contribution will be at the secondary level. Because what else can you describe it as? What can you do? You cannot create life. You cannot, which covers it all. You cannot, you or no one, no human can produce that which produced him. You can't reverse the process. You cannot in some way manifest. You cannot in some way produce anything that is primary. From that view, your only possibility of some contribution, some creation, is at the secondary level. Anybody. And art, just as it is normally referred, labeled. Art is the prime, one of the prime manifestations of secondary reality. With a dual role, I might point out, of we'll call science as opposed to art. Intellectual art. But those two operating, either one of those, is the only area that you can, from this kind of view, perceive the possibility of men doing anything that is unique. That is what, at that level, apparently threatens the ruling powers. But now you need to see the ruling powers as being a representation of life's basic protection of its primal level. Thus you have under the, I can say at certain times, but it will happen eventually, at any time, in any place, it will happen eventually, whether you live long enough to see it, that there will be a conflict, a 3D observable conflict, apparently between the ruling powers and the arts. What it amounts to is simply the kind of friction, the kind of movement between the primary and the secondary level, between life growing and its own resistance about growing, a part of its body hollering, boy, I wish pornography was cheaper so I could buy more, and then the other part of its body hollering, we got to stamp out pornography. Growth being manifested in a kind of uncertainty, that nothing is done totally by life unless it is about to dismantle, about to extinguish whatever it is. Thus, given enough real time at any given locale, whether it's apparently a democracy, a totalitarian, it doesn't matter, because you know, I hate to say it, but you know when I talk about ruling powers, I mean it metaphorically. All right, metaphorically, maybe, and maybe not. But there will be a conflict between what readily appears to be. You don't have to sit around and scratch your head over whether you're seeing it correctly. There will be ultimately a conflict, a serious conflict between the apparent ruling powers representing, in this kind of conflict, the one I'm detailing or hinting about. They are representing then the more basic protection of life's primary interest, and then the arts, going to be painter, a painter, some painters, a school of painting, it'll be an author or some school of literature that grows up over a period of time in this locale, and there will become a confrontation to the point that it will produce a kind of combat between what appears to be artists and rulers. not just between rulers and would-be coolers, not beer producers. I guess I made up my own word again. Would-be rebels, would-be rulers, not just armed conflict with those outside the gate with sticks and stones. It's those outside the gate waving paintings and books. And it gets down to the point of being a combat, always, given enough time. I wish I could tell you there was some possible significance that you could use on yourself with this, but it escapes me. I don't know. I thought I could come up with it if I talked real slow, but I might as well admit I can't. The next one, you remember this, was all gods look pretty ominous right up until the last minute. Well, how about this? All mysteries, ignorance, and fears seem pretty mysterious, stupid, and frightening up until you see them up real close. Up until you can take the one eye can see the primary basis of it, and the other eye see the secondary level, and then you see it up close. Put another way, that one of you sees what one eye sees, obviously the reality of it, whether you agree with it, whether you approve of it, that one eye can see that, and the other eye sees it's metaphorical. Put them all together and they spell a certain word that sometimes I think starts with an S, but I don't go into it. If you only see with one eye, everything is frightening. Yeah. Even things that are agreeable will finally become frightening. Sooner or later, the ruling powers will eventually fall. An artist who paints a nice portrait of the king will eventually go home and paint one where his nose looks like the size of a tomato. If you're looking with one eye, you're always going to be frightened by the gods. That is, you're going to be frightened by that which you don't know, or you're going to be not knowing by that which you're frightened. Same thing. You got to get up real close. Get up real close, one eye won't work. If you get up real close, in fact, binocular sight won't even work because you just get dizzy. But you all knew that. I think I'll end with this one. Does everybody remember? I got to tell you, figure of speech, I don't got to tell you, but a figure of speech. I never even let Kyrute say things unless they had some purpose. Once or twice throughout the years, I would have him make a little warning, like just because some of these may sound off and on like a joke or even just a one-liner, there was more to it than that, I wouldn't have done it. I would have just done a collection of jokes. But I am well aware. Some of them I pull. Some of them I have censored. I have a whole stack in my brain that would fill a book of ones I've never given to you people, for the reason that I can immediately realize that not enough of you, if any of you, would, in my lifetime, or within some reasonable length of time, ever see anything other than ha-ha. And so I just did not do it, because it's not only the ha-ha, but then you would have the propensity, your own nervous system, then to say, well, that was nothing but a joke. And if that's just a joke, I wonder if some of it, the rest of it's just a joke. And of course the answer is yes, but no. Don't go into, but do not go into that. No, 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 no. So, even the ones I let out that I know are running this precarious cutting edge of striking many of you as just being funny, and then after that, there is nothing else. By God, it's funny, or it's sarcastic, it's ridiculous, but I can't see any possible use. Here's a prime example. I'll let some of those go out on the basis that it's just my own decision, that some of you sometime will go, if not at that moment. So here's one of them that I will admit ran right along the edge, and it was this. Over 90% of all psychiatric problems are from poor posture. Remember that one? The person did not put down the full one. This one I happen to remember. The full version was 90% of all psychiatric problems are caused by poor posture. Check it out. That was the full version. All right, I'm about to end the tape. Let me give you a hint. See if you can tell how short this response is going to be. 90% of all psychiatric problems are caused by poor posture. Check it out. when you get right down to it, if you could see it all, is not this explanation as good as any? Check it out.